Okay, today I will give a talk about devising the distribution map of tropical seagrass beds in Southeast Asia, covering a quite large scale based on literature survey. So as all of you know here, so we are facing a large decline in seagrass bed worldwide, but in Wycott-Tetra's paper, there's a big gap, information gap in our region, even though it is an area with the highest species diversity of seagrass bed. But we got, actually, it is a data on temporal change. For the distribution, we already got some information, especially by World Atlas of Seagrasses, which is databased in UNEP WCMC map, which is available in open access. You can download the GIS-based map, even from Southeast Asian regions. But the problem about it is actually in this region, the newest information in WCMC is in 2003, and it has not been updated yet. So we don't know about the current status of seagrass bed in this area. So we try to devise the information of seagrass, devise or update the information of the seagrass bed distribution in this region based on literature survey, the literature published after 2000. To examine, the purpose to do this literature survey is to examine current status, country by country area of seagrass beds, and to examine temporal changes in seagrass bed area after 2000, and examine status of conservation, that is, how much seagrass bed is actually covered by MPA. So what we did is actually, firstly, we target countries in Southeast Asia which has coastline. That is 12 countries, most of the ASEAN countries, plus Timor-Leste, and southern part of Japan and southern China. And the geographic coverage actually is from 29 degrees north to 11 degrees south, and from 94 east to 137 east. And what we did is actually do the regular online survey based on Web of Science or Google Scholar. And then we actually went to some key countries like Vietnam or Thailand to look for local literature written in their own languages, Vietnamese or Thailand. And also there's a governmental survey conducted by some of the key countries in Southeast Asia. So we try to get such kind of information as well. And all the data we obtained that compiles to the GIS database. Okay, then it is a result. So we got more than 2,000 distribution data from 80 literature, reports or governmental information. All of them are open access or published. And data were reported between 2003 and to this year. Actually, Richard Answorth published a good paper this year, and Sir Mike Fortes also published a paper in the Philippines. And here's a comparison. So it is before 2003, the map in UNEP WCMP, and this is a GIS database we created based on our literature survey 2003. So you can find a big difference. At this scale, it's difficult to check, but if we look in more detail, there's a big discrepancy. For example, in Vietnam, the red is UNEP data, whereas green is our literature survey. So the new information has been available based on the governmental intense survey conducted along the whole coast of Vietnam between 1997 and 2009. And so the area seems to be increased. And we can also see the old map by UNEP is somewhat not precise. So most of the points are plotted in offshore, which is not realistic. The same thing is actually in Cambodia. There's also a thorough survey conducted by Cambodian government and IUCN in 2013. Actually, it's actually covered, and it is a polygon data showing the exact location. So it is a summary of our literature survey compared with UNEP WCMC data. So I first wanted to compare these two databases to see the increase or decrease of seagrass bed in each country. But as you see, for example, in Indonesia, there's a big increase. It's not practical, realistic. In the Philippines, it's a massive decline. And the most important thing is the overlap in the position is very low. Less than 50 is actually overlapped in our survey and UNEP data. That means actually it's not an indicator for the disappearance or recovery. Rather, information has been collected from the previously gap area or problem with accuracy in GPS coordinates. So we gave up comparing these two data for examining temporal change, but instead we try to pick up data which has more than 2 time series data from the same source with the same research method from our literature survey, and found temporal data for 60 sites from 12 sources in 7 countries over the 20-year period. So it's based on our own literature survey. So most of the data, temporal data, is available in Vietnam, Thailand, and some in Malaysia, and a little from Singapore, Philippines, Southern, and China and Japan. And based on these data, we actually calculated the percentage change in seagrass bed distribution change, as in the same method which Weikot et al. Tried. It is basically the same equation. And for example, there's individual data. One example of individual data is a large lagoon in the middle part of Vietnam, Hue. And in 1999, there's a big green area was a seagrass bed. Now, in 10 years, nearly more than 50% actually disappeared because of the development of shrimp pond. So we got these data, and it is a summary. So within 60 records, nearly half of the seagrass bed are declining. It is a more than 10% change. Whereas 18, that is 30% of the beds are increasing. That may be a good news. And 15, no detectable change. And for the declining, and also there's a 2 bed disappeared. So for the declining bed, the mean disappearance rate is, decreasing rate is minus 12, nearly 30%. That is actually much higher than the previous report of worldwide statistics by Weikot. For this different type of seagrass bed, the location is expressed as follows. So you can see most of the data comes from Vietnam and Thailand, and interestingly, Vietnam, many seagrass beds has been disappearing, decreasing, whereas seagrass bed in Thailand seems to be, more seagrass beds seems to be increasing rather than declining. But caution should be made. The survey in Thailand is actually conducted in 2006 and 2012. And you know, tsunami happened in 2004. So it may be likely they are looking at the recovery phases, especially along the west coast of Thailand. Anyway, so we got the data on temporal change after 2000. And finally, we just checked whether the current distribution of seagrass bed is how well protected. So we just use the data on MPA. It's actually issued by Protected Planet, and it's available in, you can download over GIS. And we just check whether the distribution of seagrass bed is, how much percent is covered with this map. And this is a result for the polygon data. According to our survey, so Japan has a best protection. Okay. But and Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia, and unfortunately Brunei and Singapore has least coverage. But you can also look at the change difference in color. This 1, 2, 2, or 3 is a highly protected type of MPA, while these 4 to 6 is actually something like paper MPA. So we are still not sure whether just overlying GIS of MPA and seagrass bed is really indicating that truly they are protected or well managed. Anyway, so here's a summary. So we actually revised the map of seagrass bed based on data taken after 2000. And based on that, still more than 50% of seagrass beds in Southeast Asia are declining with very great significant rate. And status of conservation of seagrass bed varies greatly among countries, but you have to be cautious because MPAs in different countries or different regions is actually regulated in a different manner. And as you can see, there's still a big gap in data, especially temporal data, in biggest countries like Indonesia and the Philippines. Fortunately, Mia already showed a very good data on the whole coast of the Philippines, so we can fill the gap in the Philippines. And next target may be Indonesia. Okay, that's it. And okay, so finally, we can fill some new data on a global change map of seagrasses. I hope we can contribute a little more to learn about seagrass bed in Asia. And I actually, for this research, we actually had a lot of cooperation from seagrass and coastal researchers in many countries. Especially, I'd like to dedicate this paper to past Dr. Chichima Yutaka, who is a key scientist in Thailand and who made a great effort for the not only seagrass but coastal benthic ecology. Thank you very much. I think 2 or 3 minutes is available. Yes, Paul. Sorry.
Thank you, Masa. Very good study, very interesting. I'm interested in Indonesia. The total you quote in your abstract is 18,700 square kilometers of seagrass, but at the same time it's the most data poor and biggest country. So obviously you would want to quote your number in papers and reports. How reliable is that figure, and how did that figure come about? Is that can you say something about the method? How do you come to a total of 18,700, whereas Indonesia has a lot of unknown? And also about Indonesia, maybe the rate of change for Indonesia specific. I'm interested.
Yes, actually, the accuracy of data depends on each literature. That's all what I can say. But for Indonesia, of course, there's a lot of unpublished or grey literature sources which we haven't collected yet. And so, especially for Indonesia, the data presented in the abstract or this presentation is still tentative one, I think.
Did you come to a tentative list of threats which is causing the decline? It seems to me that the soil coming down the rivers is one of the major, the soil erosion is one of the major problems, and the other is urbanization. But I wondered what your tentative list of threats would include.
Here's a list. Actually, during the literature survey, some of the reports and the papers actually specify the reason for these regions. So development and sedimentation is actually reported as a cause of decline in Malaysia, Singapore, or Vietnam, and South China. And fishing, dynamite fishing must be, and aquaculture, conversion to fish pond or shrimp pond is also a big cause of decline. So, but it is just a report or documentation. So we want to know but more quantitatively about the cause of decline.
Max, it's really good to see someone looking at the seagrass in that area because it's a huge gap, and I know there's still huge gaps in West Papua and Papua New Guinea. Almost no information currently, recent information anyway from those areas. But just a little bit uncomfortable about you using that data to say about global declines. You're saying there's 50% decline, but I could put that another way and say, well, 45% from your figures alone were not declining or increasing,
yes.
Which, given the management in that area, is quite surprising. I thought it'd be even worse than that, given some of the processes going on. So I just think that's sort of like a little bit careful about the sort of one-off trip in there, knowing that we don't know a lot of what's going on, knowing that we don't know a lot of areas. To actually come out and say that without caveats it worries me a little bit, Massa, that we're not really sure. I mean, if you'd come to Australia in 2011 and done Queensland East Coast, you'd have said, wow, it's really declined. But come back in 2014 and it's coming back, because we just had those big cyclones and events. So just a word of caution about making those like one-off statements. I mean, maybe it's true, but I'm still, thinking that we could be overreaching ourselves, given the sorts of data that go behind there. And the climate change world and the coral world has shown us what can happen if skeptics get hold of our data and say, or justify what you just said. And we'd have to say, well, some of the data we've got is probably not as good as we like.
Yes, I totally agree. We have to be cautious. We tend to feel happy, but but we have to be very cautious about it. Yes. How many minutes? Okay. Thank you very much.